The complete story of Singapore's airport can't just be told by its gardens, incredible infrastructure, or stack of trophies. Instead, the rise to fame for Singapore Changi is a rich story of almost 100 years. From a runway built by prisoners of war during World War II to a massive undertaking that required terraforming the ocean, Singapore's crown jewel has a history worth telling. Singapore's current airport is no doubt one of the most loved in the world. If you care about ratings, well, the airport has won the title of World's Best Airport 14 times, including an 8-year streak from 2013 to 2020. But if we go back in time, the airport looked just a little bit different. To begin the story of Singapore's rise to aviation fame, we need to go even before the onset of World War II. During the 1930s, the British colonial government was keen on adding a commercial aviation facility in one of the key trading and commercial hotspots in Southeast Asia. Back then, aircraft required dozens of stops to fly long distances, and Singapore was an ideal stepping stone to reach other British colonies and protectorates across Oceania, Asia, and the Middle East. Beginning in 1931, construction began on a facility that would exist in what was, at that point in history, a swamp filled with malaria-carrying mosquitoes and crocodiles. Using around $8 million, workers brought millions of cubic meters of clay to the Kallang Basin and succeeded in filling the swamp, making new ground to build on top of. While there had been even earlier airfields, Kallang Airport was the true first step in Singapore's modern aviation history. Once completed, the airport was state-of-the-art, with best-in-class facilities that earned it the title of the finest airport in the British Empire. Amelia Earhart would even land at the facility when it opened in 1937 and was reportedly impressed at its design. Before the war, British long-haul flag carrier Imperial Airways used the airport as a crucial midpoint stop between Britain and Australia, often trading off duties with Australia's own Qantas Empire Airways, using aircraft like the Shorts Empire Flying Boat and the de Havilland DH-86. Even the Dutch used the facility linking Jakarta, Bali, and Sydney. The airport would then soon come under heat as the main point for Allied defense against Japanese offenses in the region. Given its southern location in Singapore, it became the last-ditch location for defending against Japanese airstrikes across the city. By 1942, though, the airfield was so badly bombed that Allied fighters made the difficult decision to abandon it, with Singapore falling into Japanese hands just days later. After taking control of Singapore, the Japanese quickly realized that revamped air facilities were desperately needed. So they decided to put the prisoners of war on the island to work to build what would later become the skeleton for the best commercial airport in the world. This included tearing down the jungle that made up the Changi area of the past and flattening the terrain to build dirt strips. Incredibly, after the Allied troops took back Singapore, Japanese prisoners of war were returned the favor. Instead of sending the fighters back to Japan, the British decided that the stricken Singapore needed some help in building back its infrastructure, including Changi. This time around, the runway was reinforced with steel, bringing the facility a more durable landing surface. The back and forth during the war left Singapore with a more developed aviation system than many other post-war cities in Southeast Asia. So after the war, Singapore was able to hit the ground running, though not before dealing with a humanitarian crisis brought about by the lack of resources and ruined infrastructure. It took years of recovery to alleviate the crisis, but once it was averted, Singapore's aviation industry was ready for its next chapter. The Kallang airport of the 1930s was to be used for commercial traffic, while the Changi airfield became a Royal Air Force base. At first, this didn't pose an issue, but did once the de Havilland Comet, the first commercial jet from Britain, tried to land. It was unable to land at Kallang due to runway limitations and instead was required to land at the more capable Changi Air Force Base. In the following years, plans for a new commercial airport were strategized, an airport that could take Singapore into the golden era of air travel. A spot a few miles away from Kallang was chosen, but was also filled with trees, swamps, and around 7,000 residents of various backgrounds. As part of construction, these residents were relocated to other parts of Singapore, and the entire area was bulldozed to allow for an ambitious construction project. An 8,000 feet runway was poured, with infrastructure built to handle even the biggest jets of the 1950s. International carriers soon came pouring in, filling the airport with Boeing 707s and other early jet models. Even the iconic Kangaroo route made a stop at the airport, originally christened Singapore International Airport. Just like previous civilian facilities, the airport was made to impress, and soon the airport became a highlight for even local residents with a rooftop viewing gallery. An entire generation of local Singaporeans grew up visiting the airport as a special occasion, with plane spotting, ice cream, and smoky smells all part of the thrill. It is no wonder that aviation has become an intrinsic part of Singapore's identity. From the 50s to 70s, the airport exploded in growth from its single runway. It ballooned from 300,000 passengers to 1.7 million annual passengers in 1970. Originally, the layout was very simple, with jet stairs required to reach aircraft. This all changed with the introduction of the Boeing 747, which brought passenger numbers through the roof. The airport quickly scrambled to add the pieces needed to support the sudden influx, including finger piers that added the first ever jet bridges to the airport. In the early 70s, the Concorde was also a visitor, painted in a special livery shared between Singapore Airlines and British Airways. The route from London to Singapore took just 9 hours via a stop in Bahrain, reducing the time from 18 hours. The flight deck of such routes were managed by British Airways, but the cabin crew was rotated between Singapore Airlines and British Airways. Later, a second makeshift terminal was built exclusively for arriving passengers and international baggage. Outside of this addition, though, the airport had reached its absolute capacity for further growth. It was boxed in by housing development, its own runway, and a nearby river. Early advisors believed that diverting the river and acquiring more land was the best answer, given the scarcity of other land to build an entirely new facility. The plans included building a second runway and a third terminal. Instead, leaders decided on something else, with a few rationalizations in mind. For one, expansion at Paya Lebar would further squeeze space out of what was already a crowded part of the city. Approach patterns had jets fly close over the center of the city, meaning that skyscrapers were tightly regulated. For developers to build taller buildings, a new approach pattern was required, meaning also a new airport was needed. Relocating thousands of residents would also be necessary, which wasn't exactly a preferable move. Instead, politicians of the newly independent Singapore decided to do something radical. Just 10 years into independence, the country would undertake one of the most ambitious projects in the region's history. Now that the British were no longer in control of Changi Air Base, further flexibility was existent for civilian development. So, the very same runways that were built by prisoners of war were chosen to become the final evolution of Singapore's aviation center. In order to accommodate a large growth-oriented aviation hub, more was needed than a simple military to civilian conversion. The entire region would need to be gutted with some residential settlements relocated. Even more crucially, though, was the land reclamation process. With the help of the same Dutch designers that helped build Schiphol, Singapore took entire miles of soil from nearby hills and dropped them in the ocean, creating brand new land to help subsidize the space needs of the large facility. Sand was also dredged from the bottom of the sea floor, which helped raise the floor of the sections chosen to fill with soil. In true Singaporean fashion, the project finished 7 months ahead of schedule in 1978. From there, the true terminal and runway construction process was ready to begin. For an estimated 1 billion in US dollars, Singapore undertook an efficient building model that allowed for multiple phases of construction at one time. Thousands of foreign workers were brought in, with European and Japanese firms consulted for construction throughout. The first terminal was constructed for 10 million in annual passenger capacity, with lots of room to grow. A single runway borrowed from the military installation was modified from the get-go, with two additional longer runways to be built following the grand opening. The type of facilities needed for the airport were impressive. A new flight kitchen that was capable of 30,000 meals a day, dozens of aero bridges, and a complete profile that was 5 times the size of Paya Lebar. One of the main factors working in parallel was the rise in prominence of Singapore Airlines. Before the 70s, Malaysia and Singapore had merged ambitions under the name of Malaysia Singapore Airlines. But in the 70s, conflicting national priorities for the carrier motivated the countries to part ways and began two separate carriers. Malaysia wanted to focus on their domestic footprints, while for Singapore, domestic flights were a bit, well, useless. Any flight to Singapore was to be international by its very nature, and so Singapore had ambition for a truly international transit carrier, which conflicted with what Malaysian leaders wanted in the era. The SIA fleet of the era was made up of Boeing 707s, 727s, 737s, and DC-10s, though larger jets were heavily constrained because of the short runway at Paya Lebar. But that all changed in 1981. The opening of Changi International Airport unlocked uncapped potential for Singapore. But before we put the key in and unlock the next chapter of Singapore's aviation history, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I have several exciting episodes of this series planned, and your support through likes, comments, and subscriptions helps support further episodes coming every single week of the year. With that, let's get back to unlocking the next chapter. May 12th of 1981, the airport opened, first for test flights to train the new staff and familiarize with the location. Incredibly, the construction had largely remained on schedule, a true rarity in airports. Then, on the last days of June, a truly astounding move took place, with thousands of vehicles bringing all of the old pieces of the old airport to Changi, including dozens of aircraft that would call the airport home. And on July 1st, the first commercial flight landed from Kuala Lumpur, a Singapore Airlines Boeing 707. On the very same day, the military moved over to the old civilian airport. The Boeing 747 soon became synonymous with Singapore Airlines. The extra range helped Singapore connect its flourishing economy with the rest of the world, including North America via intermediate stops and, of course, Europe as well. The jumbo jets helped Changi bring in 10 million passengers a year quickly, the planned cap of the first terminal. In response, the airport added a new runway in 1984, and in 1985, broke ground for a second terminal. This terminal was to be the headquarters for Singapore Airlines and would feature the famous rooftop garden, indoor orchid garden, and jungle of nature, all within the confines of a single transit-focused facility. In 1990, the facility opened, bringing a new age of optimized travel for Singapore Airlines. By 1990, the Boeing 747-400 was the core of the Singapore brand, affectionately known as the Megatop. The improved range and capacity of the Dash 400 brought in thousands of new passengers, including non-stop service to the US for the first time. Terminal 2 was custom tailored for the 747-400, while Terminal 3 would later be customized for the Airbus A380. In 1994, Changi reached a new milestone of 20 million passengers served. Of course, there were a couple of blips over the years, including the Asian financial crisis of the late 90s and the SARS pandemic of the early 2000s. Changi was an airport that pioneered technology for sanitary travel infrastructure during pandemics, something that proved helpful during the recent coronavirus pandemic. In the early 2000s, Singapore Airlines introduced their famous nonstop service to Newark. The equipment of choice was the Airbus A340-500, with a special premium configuration that extended the range due to a lighter payload. The route would continue until it was eventually canceled due to high fuel prices. Of course, this also reminds me of the incredible deal Boeing pulled off with Singapore to fundamentally change their fleet composition. In the late 90s, Singapore realized that the Airbus A340 was less efficient than expected, and just not the product that they needed in their fleet compared to more efficient options like the 777s. In response, Boeing offered a landmark trade-in deal, which saw Boeing take A340s off Singapore's roster in return for an order for the 777. Also in the late 90s was the beginning of the final puzzle piece for Changi's airport's master plan, one that would bring passenger numbers up to new heights. You may have noticed this screen sitting behind me, and I don't blame you. It's probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen related to aviation. It's called the Flight Wall, and it's a gadget developed by some US-based avgeeks that uses public flight data to show the flights in your vicinity. It has an app, a dedicated community, and various modes you can customize to your liking. Best of all, the team behind Flightwall have partnered with the channel to offer an exclusive discount, available with my code through my link, which you can find in the description or in the pinned comment down below. Your purchase also helps support the channel, and in my view, will land you one of the best possible accessories to add to your setup. With that, let's get back to the video. This was, of course, the introduction of Terminal 3, a facility tailor-built for what Singapore saw as their next workhorse, the Airbus A380. The facility would be tailored for premium long-haul routes, both from the US, Europe, and across Asia. Fittingly, the terminal was made to impress, with a butterfly garden, a 5-story vertical garden, and much, much more. While this facility was tailored for affluent business travelers and tourists, another undertaking across the airport was to suit a completely different demographic: budget travel. In the early 2000s, budget carriers were keen to move into the Singaporean markets, but Singapore's main terminals commanded expensive fees that just wouldn't work for low-cost carriers. Instead, Singapore decided to build a dedicated low-cost terminal facility with a bare-bones interior, no SkyTrain connection, and much cheaper fees for airlines like Tiger Airways and Jetstar Asia. These airlines soon moved in, but almost immediately the terminal was overcrowded. The terminal, originally planned for just a few million passengers, saw demand for much more. This capacity crunch motivated Singapore to build an alternative just a few years later, tailored with flexibility to handle both narrow bodies and wide bodies. The terminal would be known as Terminal 4 and would open in 2012, replacing the budget terminal, which lasted just 6 years. In 2007, Singapore flew the Airbus A380 for the first time, while transitioning use of the jumbo jet to the new Terminal 3, which opened up in 2008. The terminal openings all helped propel Changi to the forefront of airports in Asia in the 2010s. Not only did passenger traffic propel to 40 and 50 million, but between 2013 and 2020, Changi won Best Airport in the World, helped by the state-of-the-art facilities that were built throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. In 2019, the famed Jewel opened landside, with incredible gardens, an indoor waterfall, and hundreds of shops, all under a main dome structure. During the same time frame, planning for the next and ultimate project began, which brings us to the current day. Just as real progress was being made on the next project, COVID struck. This served as a major headwind on the entire industry, and Singapore, as a market that serves exclusively international travel, was particularly affected. Soon, though, Singapore was ready to recover and began planning, again, their ambitious new terminal project. The project was to bring Singapore's airport to no doubt one of the top positions on the globe, not just in ratings, but in total passengers carried. This was the development of a 5th terminal, a project which is still underway as I speak. The project aims to serve as a terminal that can house the entirety of Singapore Airlines, with Phase 1 housing around 50 million passengers a year. This incredible number would effectively add another airport on top of Changi's current numbers. As you might imagine, Singapore doesn't exactly have a bunch of extra land lying around, so instead, builders are again implementing the strategy of laying down new land into the sea floor, with the structure even sitting a bit higher than needed to combat future estimates of rising sea levels. The terminal project would bring Singapore's footprint above 100 million passengers, and if further phases are developed, 140 million. And of course, you can only imagine the types of attractions the airport is planning for the facility. If we can take a look back at history, every improvement has only outdone the previous one, making Singapore one of the rare cases where improvements, well, they're pretty linear. Today, Singapore serves around 70 million passengers a year, already beating pre-COVID numbers. Of course, it is also home to the current world's longest flight on the Airbus A350-900 ULR. Singapore's attitude towards wowing visitors has proved effective. Of course, it's a strategy that has been employed in Dubai as well. Still, the most fascinating part of this story to me is just how storied the exact grounds of the facility are. From a modest airfield that was built by prisoners of war to an award-winning airport that just can't help but add more trophies to its shelf, there's something truly unique about Singapore's Changi International Airport. This was a fascinating story to cover, and there are many elements I just didn't have time to cover, so needless to say, I can't wait to read your comments. As always, your support in all forms is appreciated, and if you want to support further and receive extra channel perks, consider becoming a channel member. Membership gives you extra perks like earlier access to videos, recognition, and more. Press the join button to learn more. You can also find me on Instagram, X, and TikTok. And with that, that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next.